Today's show is all about earning money in role playing games. And because salary information is generally unavailable, what we're going to talk about is word rates. You might hear word rates being discussed by saying things like, "Ooh, did you hear? Company X only pays 2 cents a word," or "Company Y pays 20 cents a word." What you don't often hear about is whether these word rates are particularly good. Like, at what point does it switch from being bad to good? What is livable and what is even better than livable? If I want to be a full time freelancer, how hard is it to achieve that? So, I want you to, before we really dig into this show, ask yourself 3 questions. First, what number comes to mind when you think about what a good word rate is? 2, how many large projects do you think that a freelancer can do in a year? Say we're writing 4-hour adventures that are about 10 to 20,000 words each. How many of those 4-hour adventures would you expect a freelancer to write in a year? Third and last question. Imagine that you are writing half of a core role playing game book, around 160 pages or 100,000 words. How many months or years would it take you to write that half of a core book? Got your answers? Get ready, because here comes the horrid financial truth of freelance rates. I'm Teos Abadia, and this is the show Success in RPGs. In previous episodes, we talked about different goals you might have, and all of those goals can translate to different ways you're going to earn income for your work. You might self-publish, you might work as a full-time employee at an RPG company. But when we're discussing about word rates, what we're often going to end up talking about is freelance work. It's one of the most popular methods because you can do that easily as part-time or as a way to learn skills and get better over time. But you can do it to the point where you are a full-time freelancer, and there are many full-time freelancers. Freelancing, if you aren't familiar with the concept, means that you are sort of a worker for hire. The term actually comes from a medieval mercenary who would kind of rent themselves out to a different lord, and you were free to lift your lance for whoever you wanted to, until the other side killed you, I guess. But, as a freelancer, you might have things that are, say, like a 10,000 word adventure, and you have to write that and hand it in, and then they're going to take it and do whatever they want with it because you have now handed it off. Or maybe they say, "Hey, write a chapter on magic items. It's 5,000 words." It could be 2 subclasses, or it could be 4 monsters, and there could maybe not be a word count. But generally, you are hired for a specific job, and you're paid upon completion, and often the way that we are getting paid is through a word rate. So how long you take to make those words is up to you. Generally, you want to do a very good job on the work. You don't just want to churn in words and get on to the next job, because doing good work leads to more work and establishes a reputation for you as a valued freelancer. If you outline for 2 days, that's on you if that's what it takes to make good work. And your reputation is going to come from the quality of that work by whatever means it takes to do it. Some people I know rewrite a thing 3 times before they really, really like it. Again, that's totally up to you and your process. You're getting paid for the final words that you push in, not all of that process that you may actually need to make it. So, again, people may do freelancing full-time, they may do it part-time, and projects can span a wide range of time. You may find that the bigger freelance projects, you get kind of pulled into a team, and it can take many months to really get going. So even as a part-time freelancer, how you get different projects and overlap them can be quite challenging. I say all of this so that you kind of get the feel that word rates aren't just like start project end, start project end. It's a complex picture, and that impacts the word rates. We as fans, even if you're not working in this industry, we would like word rates to be viable. We want freelancers to be able to live off of the great work they do, right? So the first thing I want to do is I want to share what some numbers look like for typical bands of pay. And what you are seeing on your screen right now is some bands, 3 different bands of numbers of words. So 10,000 words, which is something like, well, I've got some examples here. So 10,000 words is about what a small short adventure would be. A chapter in Acquisitions Incorporated, for example, in the adventure section, if you go to one of those chapters, those are 10 to 15,000 words, but roughly around 15,000 words. An Adventurers League adventure is about 15 to 20,000 words. I wrote Jungle Treks with Eric Mengi. That's about 20,000 words, and I wrote half of it, so 10,000 words right there. And if you've seen the latest adventure in the Kingdoms and Warfare book for MCDM, I wrote Regent of Bedegar, and that's about 30,000 words. So you can see here different bands, right? 10,000 words, 20,000 words, 40,000 words. And we can look at different rates, like 5 cents a word or 10 cents a word, 20, 30, right? And what you get paid for that. So if I write 10,000 words and I'm getting 5 cents a word, I get $500 for my work. But if I were to get 20 cents a word, I get $2,000 compared to 500. 4 times the pay, same amount of words. And this becomes, of course, more noticeable a difference as we get to the larger amounts, right? 40,000 words, when I'm getting paid 30 cents a word, is $12,000. So we can do some kind of comparisons here, like writing 10,000 words at 30 cents a word, $3,000, is way better than doing twice the work, 20,000 words at 10 cents, right? So, take a look at these numbers, and I think they give you a feel for just how impactful that word rate can be, right? Writing 10 to 20,000 words at a good rate gets you a lot more money. But that concept of, what we're getting paid by the word can be a little tricky, as I said at the beginning of the show. There's more to it than just whether a particular project gives you a few more $1,000s. We're trying to hopefully be at a place where our industry can reliably have freelancers live off of their earnings. So let's take a look at this second sheet, which really gets into yearly income. So what could we earn full time? And I've set this up so I can manipulate the numbers up here in these yellow boxes. How many words can I write in the day? Let's say 1,200 words. And this number of 1,200 words actually is not far off from what TSR, the company that used to own D&D, used to expect from employees. They thought it was about 24,000 words per month that they should be able to write. Some companies I know today figure on about 1,000 words a day on average. And a lot of writers say they can do more than that. For how long they can sustain that, I think is a good question. But let's start with this idea of 1.2 thousand words a day. But a great question is, how many days do we actually get to write? I'm a parent with a family, and I have full-time jobs. So my days per year are far lower than it would be if I were a full-time freelancer. And that is also true for a lot of people who are full-time freelancers and aren't parents or don't have other jobs, because they have to think about other factors that eat up time. You should have vacations, for example, but also there are days that aren't going to be writing. There are days that, like, I'm signed on for a project, but there are design meetings, and there could be several design meetings before a project ever kicks off. And I probably don't even know how many of those days I'm going to have before I actually get the assignment and the go-ahead to start writing. I may be asked to outline or things like that, and none of that actually might be part of the word count until I finally get to the point where it's like, okay, write it, and now I can go. So that can be days of work that are unpaid. And we can also have days where we spend online researching, going through our library of books that we have, researching, outlining, and no actual words are written. Or we write a bunch of stuff, we don't like it, and we have to rewrite it. So usually there are about 260 work days in a calendar year. And you could say, well, maybe 230 seems like a good number, because that leaves some days to count for all those different things, finding a job, for example. And here's a true story. Not too long ago, I was asked to set aside any other projects I had to focus on a really cool project with a major company. So I turned down several other opportunities. Sorry to those people. So I could do this work. Well, for 3 months, the project was delayed and nothing happened. I had 2 quick design meetings. I turned in a concept outline and the project just sort of faded away. 3 months, no work, no pay, right? It's hard to know how often this happens in our industry. If we take time to account for all those jobs, 230 days per year could actually be pretty good. But if we're writing 1,200 words per day and we're doing that on 230 days in a year, that means we have 276,000 words per year. So what does that mean? Well, as you can see here in this chart, it depends on the word rate, right? But here are a bunch of different word rates, all assuming these 1,200 words per day. And that gives us a different amount of income that we're getting each day that we manage to actually do that. We multiply that by the number of days in the year that we're working, and we come up with these numbers. Now, a quick look at these might make you think, well, hey, that actually looks pretty good. And maybe. So these first two are a little bit problematic. These are at 5 cents a word. And again, sometimes I hear people talking about 2 cents a word or even lower. I can't even contemplate those rates, but maybe I'm fortunate to do that. But even at these lower rates, the amount per year is below the poverty line, right? So the poverty line is just above it. The poverty line in the United States is around 13,590. The poverty line for a family of 2 is about 18,310. So here at this rate of 6 cents per word, we are below that poverty line for a family of 2. I have a family of 4. So this gets into that question of what kind of income do we need? And what kind of income do we think people in our industry should be able to earn? 20 cents is seen as a really, really good rate. And that caps us at about $50,200 as an income if we're writing 276,000 words per year. But maybe we aren't. Like maybe we really are writing a lot lower than that. And here is the assumption of 900 words per day for 220 days a year. And what we get to see here is these numbers really drop, right? So now that 20-cent word rate, which is seen as really, really good in our industry, gets us to an income of about $39,600. I will say that that is lower than the amount of tuition that my daughter is going through at college right now. So if I had that word rate and was writing 198,000 words a year, I would not be able to afford college for my daughter, nor any of my other costs that I have. And what can we write? It's hard to say, right? The picture, if you kind of stay attuned to the industry, you'll hear a lot of things. Like here's Richard Baker, a person I super admire, 2,300 words today, almost 40,000 in the last 30 days. Wish I could say what I'm working on. I myself have had weeks where I did 10,000 words a week for 3 weeks in a row. I did that on the Acquisitions Incorporated project. I did something similar when I was writing Dwarven Forge, but I also have lots and lots of weeks where I don't produce this kind of output. Last is Owen Stevens has been really good about sharing ideas. He primarily works on Pathfinder products, and he talked about how he had a 100,000 word project, was paid $500 for the entire thing. That's half a cent a word. He didn't know any better at this time. He thought this was super great. He was working 40 to 50 hours a week, eventually hit 1,000 words a week that he was writing, which he says is 4 times his normal speed. So normally he's writing about 250 words a week. And sharing further, he talks about the impact that this had on his life. He had a lot of, I'm trying to center this here, had a lot of costs that this could not catch up with. So after 13 years of freelancing, I had tens of thousands of dollars of medical and occasional debt that we still haven't fully paid off. 80-hour work week became the norm. 100-hour work week happened way too often. More than 130-hour all-nighter shifts, a feat I am physically no longer capable of pulling off. I can't recommend full-time freelance writing tabletop games as a career choice. So yeah, that's what this is trying to kind of look at. And if there is interest, I can certainly share these worksheets and you can try out, your combination of what you might be able to do. If you do 1,000 words and you do, 200 words per day, what does that mean? And what kind of income could you possibly get? And I want to sort of look at not just this view, which I think another thing I'll mention here is that the cost of living varies. I live in the United States. It can be very different in other countries, but it could also vary greatly by state within the US. So the 2020 average living wage for a family of four is 68,800. So under this scenario, it would take a rate of 30 cents a word with 1,000 words a day on 200 days to get to that rate, right? So if you're kind of a parent working through this scenario, it would be very hard for you to reach what you need to attain. So another thing I want to look at is what it looks like if you are trying to start from the other side. Flip the question around and say, hey, I want to have a particular level of income. What do I need to do to earn that? And that's what this next sheet tells us. So here we're looking at the words you need for a desired income. And we start with the rate, right? So what rate could you reliably land? If you can get a rate of 12 cents a word, which some folks might think that's fairly attainable if they have a little bit of a reputation, then you can look and say, well, what is the income you want to earn? Here's how many words you must write in a year. And this gets quite challenging, right? So to earn that $60,000, you need to have 500,000 words per year. As a point of comparison, when I wrote the Chulton Death Curse Revised, which is a fairly short product, this was 2,570 words. It was fairly easy for me to write. And if I wanted to just earn 30,000 a year, well, I'd need to write 100 of those in a year. That's maybe possible, but it's a lot of work to put out 100 supplements like that, even if they're short ones. I mean, this is a short supplement, but it would take 100 of those, right, to do that. If I want to get into this higher level of income, and that's the word rate that my work is translating into, I mean, the number of words becomes just unbelievable, right? So $100,000 requires 833,000. And some of you may say, well, I don't need $100,000 to live, but you might if you live in LA, right? Or if you live in Chicago or New York City, the rent costs, all of that. And if you're a family that's more than just yourself, it could easily get to where you're looking at wanting to have these higher rates of pay to be also competitive with other options you may have. You may be paying off school loans, for example, because maybe you thought you would go off and get an MBA or something like that, and you'd like to have a higher earning rate. Well, here's what we're looking at, right? Now let's take a look at one more tab here on our worksheet. And this is the idea of how many projects you might have to write. So if I choose an income, like we did in the last worksheet, and I say, all right, I want to make that much in a year, how many 20,000 word projects do I need to land? A 20,000 word project, again, is sort of like your 4-hour long adventure. It's a little bit on the longer side of a 4-hour adventure with more words and maybe handouts and things like that, a little more involved. So if I'm earning the equivalent of 12 cents a word and I'm working on 20,000 word projects and I want a particular income, this column tracks the number of projects you need to write that each has 20,000 words. So if I want to make $50,000 a year, my word rate is 12 cents a word, I must write 20,000 word projects to do that. And I like this because it really puts it into perspective, because I think writing 20,000 word projects is not something a lot of people can do. For one, you have to land each of these projects, right? So if we think about, these being things that you're writing for other entities, you'd have to land these projects, right? So like, land a project with MCDM one month, Monte Cook Games the next, so on, just working down through this list to get like all of these different projects. And if I'm landing 20 projects, that means I'm writing more than one per month. So I'm finding more than one opportunity every given month. That seems to me like an extremely tall order. So why do I bring all of this up? For a number of reasons. One is that this will lead into other show topics that we're going to cover. Life is not just word rates, but it's important because word rates often get tossed around to think about what they mean and what it says about the health of our industry. We can also think about the RPG company that's hiring all of these freelancers. It's not like they are generally in the business of ripping off a freelancer. It's more that they have to take on these costs, right? So most DMs Guild collaborations, for example, or even on Drive Through RPG, they can't offer a freelancer $3,000 to write 10,000 words. That's because they might not earn 3,000 in sales. A $5 adventure, if you're trying to, if you would have to sell 1,200 copies at a 50% royalty rate to be able to match that, and you would be breaking even. And you probably have things like art costs and editing and layout. So you need actually way more sales than that to be able to pay someone this kind of top rate. So this is, of course, very difficult when fans out there say that a $20 PDF is too expensive, and all of these costs and all of these realities are true. We'll look at these angles of companies and options other than freelance rates in the future, but it'll play off of this show as well. So, is there a solution for the freelancer besides fans just paying more for products, which would be good? I think the first thing is I want folks out there to be aware, both freelancers and the general hobby public, of the truth behind these freelance rates and what it takes for them to be viable, to truly work as rates. As a freelancer, the more that you understand this challenge and you can plan for it, the better prepared you will be. Know that this problem exists and that someone might tell you 20 cents a word is a great rate, and historically speaking, that's very true. But turning that into a viable salary will be a challenge. Measuring the income and level of work that you can achieve over time will make you a better freelancer, a smarter freelancer, and more prepared to handle this challenge. Next time, we're going to talk about budgeting, which looks at how you can make do and how you can figure out what you can make do when it comes to income, because you'll understand your costs. I hope you enjoyed this show. If you do, please subscribe to this channel. And once you do, next to it, click on that bell icon in YouTube next to the subscribe box. That'll notify you every time I launch a new video. My thanks to all my supporters who allow me to make this show. Check out the links below on how to support me as well. Thanks, and I'll see you next time on Success in RPGs.